The name alone could silence a room. At 35, he commanded an empire built on power, fear, and absolute control. The king of Chicago's underworld. A man who never apologized, never explained, and never looked back. His tailored suits cost more than most people's cars. His word was law. His enemies disappeared. His allies trembled. But 6 months ago, Alessandro Moretti did something no one expected. He signed divorce papers. He let her go. He walked away from the only woman who ever made him feel human. And tonight, in the heart of his city, in a restaurant where champagne flows like water and secrets hide behind every smile, Alessandro is about to discover that some chapters don't end just because you close the book. Some stories write themselves. The city lights of Chicago shimmered like fallen stars against the endless night sky. From the top floor of Blackwood Tower, the view was breathtaking, a kingdom of glass and steel, of dreams and darkness, all laid out like a chessboard waiting for the next move. Alessandro Moretti stood at the window, a crystal glass of whiskey cradled in his hand. The amber liquid caught the light, swirling slowly as he turned the glass with practiced ease. 6 months. 183 days, to be exact. Not that he was counting. The divorce had been clean. Professional. Almost too easy. The lawyers had done their job efficiently, paperwork signed, assets divided, lives separated with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. To the world, Alessandro had moved on. His business empire expanded. His reputation grew even more formidable. His days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and the endless game of power that defined his existence. But in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the phone calls and the deals and the carefully controlled chaos of his life, there was a name that echoed in the silence. Sophia. Alessandro took a slow sip of whiskey, feeling the burn slide down his throat. He welcomed it. Physical pain was simple. Manageable. Unlike the ghost that sometimes appeared in his penthouse late at night, when the city slept and he was alone with memories he couldn't quite bury. Boss. Marco's voice cut through his thoughts. His right-hand man stood at the doorway, respectful as always, waiting for permission to enter. What is it? Alessandro's voice was smooth, controlled, the voice of a man who never revealed what he truly felt. The reservation. At La Perla. Your table is ready in 20 minutes. Alessandro nodded once. Business dinner. Another investor trying to get close to the Moretti empire. Another evening of careful words and calculated smiles. Just another night in the life he had built. Prepare the car. 30 minutes later, Alessandro's black Rolls-Royce glided through the streets of Chicago like a panther stalking through shadows. Inside, he sat in the back seat, his phone in hand, reviewing contracts with the same intensity he applied to everything in his life. Control. Always control. When the car stopped in front of La Perla, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, the world seemed to pause. The valet rushed forward. The doorman straightened. Even the couple stepping out of their car nearby froze, recognizing the vehicle. Everyone knew who was arriving. Alessandro's bodyguards emerged first, their eyes scanning every corner, every face, every shadow. Only when they were satisfied did Alessandro step out, his presence commanding immediate attention without a single word spoken. The restaurant owner himself rushed forward, his hands clasped together nervously. Mr. Moretti. Welcome, welcome. Your private table is prepared exactly as you requested. The chef has prepared something special tonight, Anne. Alessandro raised one hand slightly. The owner fell silent immediately. Lead the way, Alessandro said simply. Inside, La Perla was a masterpiece of elegance. Soft golden lighting cast a warm glow over tables draped in white linen. A pianist played something classical and melancholic in the corner. The air smelled of expensive wine and fresh flowers. Wealthy patrons spoke in hushed tones, their laughter quiet and refined. This was a place where deals were made, where power was traded over dessert, where the elite of Chicago came to see and be seen. Alessandro walked through the main dining room toward his private section, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. His eyes moved over the room with the practiced awareness of a man who had survived by noticing everything. And then, he saw her. Time didn't stop. The world didn't freeze. There was no dramatic musical crescendo. But Alessandro's next step hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Near the window, bathed in soft candlelight, sat a woman he had not seen in 183 days. Sophia. She was alone at a small table, her attention focused on the menu in front of her. The candlelight played across her features, the delicate line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek, the dark hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders. For just a moment, Alessandro forgot how to breathe. She looked different. More beautiful, somehow. There was a softness to her that hadn't been there before. A gentle glow that made her seem almost ethereal in the dim light. And then his gaze dropped lower. To her belly. Round. Unmistakable. Beautiful. Pregnant. The realization hit Alessandro like a physical blow. His mind, trained to process information instantly, calculated automatically. 7 months. Maybe more. His hand tightened around his phone. 6 months since the divorce. Which meant the baby wasn't his. Couldn't be his. By the time they'd signed those papers, she was already. Alessandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. But his expression remained perfectly calm. Perfectly controlled. Because Alessandro Moretti had learned long ago that the greatest weapon wasn't rage. It was indifference. He looked away. One smooth, deliberate movement. And then he continued walking, as if he had seen nothing more interesting than another stranger in a restaurant full of strangers. His bodyguards followed without question. Behind him, across the restaurant, Sophia's hand trembled slightly as she set down her menu. She had seen him too. Of course she had. How could she not? Alessandro Moretti commanded attention simply by existing. Even in a room full of Chicago's wealthiest, he stood apart, a king among courtiers, a force of nature in an expensive suit. Her heart hammered against her ribs painfully. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. What she would say if they met. How she would explain. Whether she would tell him the truth or hold it close, protecting it like the precious secret it was. But in all her imaginings, she had never considered this response. Nothing. No anger. No questions. No confrontation. He had looked at her, looked right at her pregnant belly, and simply walked away. As if she were nobody. As if they had never shared a bed, a home, a life. As if the ring she once wore on her finger had never existed. Sophia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where the baby kicked gently, as if sensing her distress. "It's okay," she whispered softly, so quietly that not even the waiter nearby could hear. "It's okay, little one." But even as she said the words, tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. Because it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. In the private dining room, Alessandro sat at the head of an elegant table set for 4. The investor he was meeting hadn't arrived yet, which left him alone with Marco and 2 other bodyguards positioned at strategic points in the room. Marco poured water into Alessandro's glass, his movements careful and precise. But Alessandro could feel his right-hand man watching him. Marco had been with him for 8 years. Long enough to read the signs that others missed. Long enough to know when something was wrong, even when Alessandro's face revealed nothing. "Boss," Marco said carefully, his voice low. "Are you all right?" Alessandro reached for his glass, his movements unhurried. "I'm fine." Silence. Marco shifted his weight slightly. That woman out there, wasn't that? Yes. The word was final. Definitive. Marco knew better than to push. But loyalty sometimes demanded risk. She's pregnant. Alessandro took a slow sip of water. I noticed. Another silence, heavier than the first. Boss, if you want to. Marco. Alessandro's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. People move on. That's life. She has clearly moved on with someone else. That's her choice. Her life. None of my concern. Marco nodded slowly. But he didn't believe a word of it. Because he had seen Alessandro's hand tighten around that phone. Had noticed the fraction of a second pause in his boss's stride. Had watched the almost imperceptible tension in Alessandro's shoulders. When Alessandro spoke this calmly about something, it usually meant a hurricane was raging inside. Outside in the main dining room, Sofia tried to focus on her food. The pasta was exquisite, she was sure. La Perla was famous for its cuisine. But everything tasted like ash in her mouth. Her hands rested on her belly, feeling the gentle movements within. 7 months and 2 weeks. The baby was healthy. Active. Strong. Just like his father. Your father, she thought, her eyes closing briefly. Your father is in the next room, and he doesn't even know you exist. The waiter appeared. Ma'am? Is everything all right with your meal? Sofia forced a smile. It's perfect, thank you. He nodded and retreated. Alone again, Sofia stared at her reflection in the darkened window. 6 months ago, when the lawyers had placed those divorce papers in front of her, she had already known she was pregnant. 2 months along. Barely showing. Still processing the shock and wonder and terror of it all. She could have told Alessandro then. Could have used it to stop the divorce, to demand they try again, to fight for their marriage. But she hadn't. Because their marriage had been crumbling for months before that. Because Alessandro's world was dangerous, violent, unpredictable. Because she had wanted more than just his name and his protection, she had wanted his heart, and that was the one thing Alessandro Moretti never gave anyone. So she had signed the papers. Walked away. And kept the secret growing inside her. She told herself it was for the best. That Alessandro deserved his freedom. That a child didn't belong in the violent world he inhabited. That maybe, just maybe, she could give their baby a normal life, away from the darkness, away from the danger, away from the empire of shadows. But tonight, seeing him again. Seeing the way he looked at her belly and felt nothing. It hurt more than she had imagined possible. Check, please, she whispered when the waiter passed again. In the private room, Alessandro stood abruptly. The investor still hadn't arrived. Alessandro didn't care. I'm leaving, he announced. Marco looked surprised. Boss? The meeting. Cancel it. Make an excuse. I don't care. But. Alessandro was already moving toward the door, his expression unreadable. I've lost my appetite. The bodyguard scrambled to follow. As Alessandro strode through the main dining room again, his eyes moved automatically to the table by the window. Sofia was standing, gathering her coat. She moved carefully, one hand supporting her lower back in that universal gesture of pregnant women everywhere. For just a second, barely a heartbeat, Alessandro's stride slowed. He noticed things he hadn't before. The tiredness in her eyes. The slight tremor in her hands. The way she stood alone, with no one helping her with her coat, no partner rushing to her side. For just a second, something twisted in Alessandro's chest. Then he was past her, through the doors, into the night. The rain had started, a cold Chicago drizzle that painted the streets in shades of silver and shadow. Alessandro's bodyguards rushed to bring the car closer, but he waved them off, standing in the rain for a moment, letting it cool the strange heat that had built inside him. Behind him, the restaurant doors opened. Sophia stepped out, fumbling with an umbrella that wouldn't open properly. She was focused on the umbrella, on protecting her belly from the rain, on finding a cab in the busy street. She didn't see the slick step. Didn't notice how the rain had made the marble entrance treacherous. Her heel caught. Her body tilted forward. For a fraction of a second, Sophia saw the wet pavement rushing toward her, imagined the impact, the pain, the danger. And then strong arms caught her. Firm. Steady. Holding her as if she weighed nothing. Sophia gasped, her heart racing from the shock and the sudden, familiar scent that surrounded her. Sandalwood. Leather. Whiskey. She knew that scent. Had fallen asleep to it 1,000 times. Slowly, she looked up. Into eyes as dark and deep as midnight. Alessandro. Time froze. The rain fell around them in a silver curtain. The city moved on, cars passing, people hurrying, life continuing. But in that moment, there was only the two of them. His arm was firm around her waist, holding her against his chest. Her hand had instinctively gripped his jacket. They were closer than they had been in 6 months. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough that he could feel the rapid beating of her heart. "You should be more careful," Alessandro said, his voice low and controlled. Sophia's breath caught. "Thank you." She tried to step back, to regain her balance, her composure, her carefully constructed walls. But Alessandro didn't release her immediately. His eyes dropped to her stomach, unavoidable now, pressed between them. Up close, there was no pretending. No ignoring. No looking away. "How many months?" His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Sophia's throat tightened. 7. Alessandro nodded once, slowly. Then, carefully, he released her. Steadied her on her feet. Stepped back with the formal distance of a stranger helping another stranger. "Congratulations." One word. Simple. Polite. Perfectly neutral. It cut deeper than any accusation could have. "Thank you," Sophia whispered. The rain continued falling. Alessandro's car pulled up to the curb. But he didn't move toward it. "You look tired," he observed. "I'm fine." Her voice wasn't convincing. Even to her own ears. Alessandro made a decision. He signaled to Marco, who was hovering nearby with an umbrella. "Bring the car here." Sophia shook her head quickly. "That's not necessary. You're pregnant. I can manage on my own." "I've been managing for," she stopped herself. Alessandro's eyes sharpened slightly, but his expression remained neutral. "For how long?" he asked softly. Sophia looked away. "It doesn't matter." "Sophia." "I said it's not necessary, Alessandro." The sound of his name on her lips did something to him. Something he couldn't quite control. "You always were stubborn," he said, and for the first time that night, there was the faintest hint of something other than ice in his voice. Sophia almost laughed, a broken, painful sound. "That's funny. You used to say that when we were married." The word hung between them. Married. Past tense. A ghost of what they'd been. The car pulled up. Marco opened the door, waiting. Alessandro looked at Sophia, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time that night. Saw the shadows under her eyes. The slight sway in her stance. The protective hand on her belly. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a question. "Alessandro. You're 7 months pregnant, standing in the rain, and you look like you're about to fall asleep on your feet. Get in the car." For a moment, Sofia considered refusing. Considered walking away with her pride intact. But she was tired. So tired. And something in Alessandro's voice, something beneath the command, sounded almost worried. Slowly, she climbed into the car. Alessandro followed, settling into the seat across from her. Marco closed the door, sealing them into the quiet luxury of the vehicle. The driver waited for an address. Lakeview Apartments, Sofia said quietly. Building 7. The car began to move. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was warm, insulated from the cold Chicago rain. Soft leather seats. The subtle scent of expensive cologne. The quiet hum of the engine. But the silence between Alessandro and Sofia was deafening. They sat across from each other, her by the window, him with his body angled slightly away, his face cast in shadows from the passing streetlights. Neither spoke for the first few minutes. Sofia kept her hands folded over her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. Her daughter, because yes, it was a girl, though Alessandro didn't know that, was active tonight, as if sensing her mother's turbulent emotions. What am I doing here? Sofia thought. I should have said no. Should have walked away. Should have protected this secret a little longer. But the truth was, she was exhausted. Exhausted from carrying this weight alone. Exhausted from pretending everything was fine. Exhausted from loving a man who had let her go without fighting for her. Alessandro, meanwhile, stared out his own window, his jaw tight. His mind was a battlefield. Logic told him one thing: Sofia was 7 months pregnant. They'd been divorced for 6. The baby wasn't his. She had moved on. End of story. But something else, something deeper, something that lived in the part of him he tried to ignore, whispered a different truth. 7 months pregnant. The divorce was 6 months ago. But the marriage was falling apart long before that. They'd lived in separate rooms for the last 2 months before the divorce. Hadn't touched each other. Hadn't. Alessandro's hands curled into fists on his lap. Unless. Finally, unable to bear the silence anymore, Alessandro spoke. Does the father take care of you? His voice was carefully neutral, but there was an edge beneath it, something sharp and dangerous. Sofia turned from the window. In the dim light, her face was pale, her eyes shadowed. Yes, she answered softly. It wasn't a lie. The baby's father did take care of her. In his own way. Through the money she'd refused to accept in the divorce settlement but had been mysteriously deposited into an account she didn't know existed. Through the anonymous payments for her medical bills. Through the bodyguard she sometimes noticed following her from a distance, thinking she didn't see him. Alessandro Moretti took care of what was his. Even when he didn't know it was his. Good, Alessandro said, his voice flat. Another silence. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the roof. Do you love him? The question surprised them both. Alessandro hadn't meant to ask it. The words had slipped out before his iron control could stop them. Sofia's breath caught. She turned to look at him fully for the first time since entering the car. In the shifting light, she could see his face, that beautiful, dangerous face that had haunted her dreams for 6 months. The strong jaw. The aquiline nose. The eyes that could be warm as summer or cold as winter depending on his mood. Right now, they were unreadable. Why does it matter? She asked quietly. It doesn't, Alessandro replied too quickly. I'm simply making conversation. You hate small talk. I'm being polite. You're never polite unless you want something. A ghost of a smile touched Alessandro's lips, gone as quickly as it appeared. You remember that about me. I remember everything about you, Alessandro. The words hung in the air between them. Everything. The way he liked his coffee, black, no sugar, but with a twist of lemon peel that most people never noticed. The way he listened to opera when he thought no one was watching, his eyes closed, his expression almost peaceful. The way his hands could be gentle when he touched her face, even though those same hands had built an empire on violence. The way he'd held her on their wedding night, whispering promises in Italian that she'd never asked him to translate because the tone had said everything. The way he'd pushed her away, month by month, as his world grew darker and more dangerous, until she'd become another beautiful object in his collection rather than his partner, his love, his wife. Alessandro cleared his throat. You didn't answer my question. Which one? Do you love him? The father? Sophia looked down at her belly, her hand moving in slow, soothing circles. With everything I have, she whispered. And it was the truth. She loved the father of her baby with a depth and intensity that terrified her. Even now. Even after everything. Even though he was sitting 3 feet away and didn't even know she was talking about him. Alessandro nodded once, sharply. Then he's a lucky man. If only you knew, Sophia thought. The car slowed, pulling up in front of her apartment building. It wasn't in a bad neighborhood, but it wasn't the luxury she'd been accustomed to during their marriage either. A modest high-rise. Clean. Safe. Anonymous. The driver put the car in park. Sophia reached for the door handle. Thank you for the ride, she said softly. Sophia. She paused, her hand on the handle. Yes? Alessandro was looking at her now, really looking at her, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. If he ever hurts you. Alessandro's voice was low, controlled, but beneath it ran a current of something dark and dangerous. Tell me. Sophia's eyes softened. For a moment, the woman who'd fallen in love with a dangerous man all those years ago reappeared, the one who'd seen past the reputation, past the fear, past the empire of shadows to the man underneath. You haven't changed, she whispered. No, Alessandro replied. I've just learned to let go. Sophia studied his face for a long moment. Then, quietly, she said something that changed everything. Have you, though? Alessandro's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Sophia gathered her coat, preparing to leave. You know exactly what it means, Alessandro. You always were too smart to play dumb. She opened the door, the cold night air rushing in. But before she could step out, Alessandro spoke again, his voice rougher now, the control slipping just slightly. Sophia. Wait. She paused, 1 foot already on the curb. The baby. Alessandro's voice was quiet, almost hesitant, an unusual quality for a man who never hesitated about anything. Is the father treating you well? Really? Sophia's heart clenched. She could end this now. Could tell him the truth. Could watch his world shift on its axis. But she was afraid. Afraid of his reaction. Afraid he would feel trapped. Afraid that he would want the baby but not her, and she couldn't bear to be tied to him only through obligation, only through a child, only through duty rather than love. He's trying, she said instead. In his own way. Even when he doesn't know he is. Alessandro frowned, clearly confused by the cryptic answer. But before he could question it, Sophia stepped out of the car. Good night, Alessandro. Sophia. She closed the door. Alessandro watched through the rain-streaked window as she walked toward the building entrance, moving slowly, carefully, one hand always on her belly. She didn't look back. Marco cleared his throat from the front seat. Boss, should I? No, Alessandro said sharply. Then, more quietly, no. Let her go. But even as he said it, his eyes remained fixed on her retreating figure. Sophia reached the building entrance, fumbled with her keys for a moment, then disappeared inside. The car remained parked. Alessandro sat in the back seat, motionless, his mind racing. 7 months pregnant. Divorced 6 months ago. But the timeline. They'd been separated 2 months before the divorce was finalized. Living in different parts of the same house. Not speaking. Not touching. Not touching. But before that, there had been that one night. 9 months ago. Alessandro's eyes closed briefly as the memory surfaced, unbidden, unwanted, but impossible to suppress. Flashback, 9 months ago. They had been fighting. Again. About his business. About the danger. About the fact that he came home with blood on his shirt more often than he came home for dinner. Sofia had been crying. Alessandro had been cold, defensive, building walls faster than she could tear them down. "I can't do this anymore," she had whispered. "I can't be married to a ghost. You're here, but you're not here." "Then leave," Alessandro had said, his voice like ice. "If I'm such a disappointment, there's the door." She had stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" But then something had broken in her eyes. Something had shifted from pain to fury. And she had done something she'd never done before. She'd walked up to him, this powerful, dangerous man, and slapped him across the face. Not hard. But hard enough. "You're a coward," she had hissed. "You hide behind your power and your reputation and your empire, but you're terrified. Terrified of actually feeling something. Terrified of letting someone in. Terrified of." He had kissed her. Sudden. Fierce. Desperate. And she had kissed him back. That night, they hadn't been Alessandro Moretti, feared Mafia boss, and Sofia Moretti, his distant wife. They had been two people who loved each other and didn't know how to save what they were losing. It had been passionate. Intense. Almost violent in its emotion. And the next morning, they had woken up in the same bed, and the walls had been back up, higher and stronger than ever. 2 months later, divorce papers were signed. Present day. Alessandro opened his eyes slowly. "Boss?" Marco's voice was careful, concerned. Alessandro's mind was calculating, piecing together a puzzle he hadn't known existed. That night. 9 months ago. Which would mean. "Marco," Alessandro said quietly. "What's today's date?" "March 14th. "And Sofia said she's 7 months pregnant?" "Yes, boss." Alessandro's jaw clenched. 7 months. Which meant the baby was conceived. 9 months ago. "Boss, what are you thinking?" Alessandro didn't answer immediately. His hands curled into fists on his lap. If the baby was conceived 9 months ago. If Sofia had gotten pregnant that night. Then the father she'd been talking about was him. The realization hit Alessandro like a freight train. The baby was his. His daughter. And Sofia, stubborn, proud, self-sacrificing Sofia, had let him believe otherwise. Had sat in this car and talked about the father, taking care of her in his own way. Had signed those divorce papers knowing she was pregnant. Had walked away from him, from his protection, from everything, while carrying his child. "Boss? Are you all right? You look." "Take me back to the restaurant," Alessandro interrupted, his voice sharp. "What?" But the meeting was. "Now, Marco." Marco knew better than to argue when Alessandro used that tone. The car pulled away from the curb, heading back toward La Perla. But Alessandro's mind was already racing ahead. Why hadn't she told him? Why keep such a massive secret? Why let him believe the baby belonged to someone else? "Because you let her go," a voice whispered in his head. "Because you were too proud to fight for her. Because you thought power and control were more important than love. Because when she needed you to choose her, you chose your empire instead. Alessandro's phone buzzed. A message from one of his lieutenants about a shipment, about money, about the endless business of running a criminal organization. He ignored it. For the first time in his life, Alessandro Moretti had something more important than power. He had a daughter he didn't know existed. And a woman he'd never stopped loving, even though he'd been too much of a coward to admit it. Back in her apartment, Sofia closed the door and leaned against it, her legs trembling. She'd made it. Survived the encounter. But barely. The baby kicked hard, and Sofia looked down, her hand moving to the spot. I know, piccola, she whispered in Italian, a habit she'd picked up from Alessandro. I know. You want to meet your papa. Tears started falling before she could stop them. But it's complicated, my darling. So complicated. She moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Somewhere out there, Alessandro was driving away. Believing she'd moved on. Believing the baby was another man's. And maybe that was better. Maybe he would be happier not knowing. Maybe their daughter would be safer away from his world. Maybe. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Sofia almost didn't answer. But something made her press accept. Hello? Silence on the other end. Then, a voice she knew better than her own. Why didn't you tell me? Sofia's blood ran cold. Alessandro. Why didn't you tell me, Sofia? His voice wasn't angry. It was something worse. Hurt. I don't know what you. Don't lie to me. Not about this. 9 months, Sofia. That baby is 9 months in the making. Which means she's mine. Sofia's hand flew to her mouth. She. He'd said she. How did you? I've had people watching you since the day you left. Do you really think I would let you walk around this city unprotected? Do you think I don't know about every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every goddamn prenatal vitamin you take? Sofia sank onto her couch, her legs giving out. You've been watching me? Always, Alessandro said, and his voice was rough with emotion. Did you really think I could just let you go? That I could stop caring? Stop protecting you? Then why didn't you? Because you wanted freedom. You wanted out of this life, out of my world, out of the darkness. So I gave it to you. I let you go. I signed those papers even though every instinct I had screamed at me to fight for you. Sofia was crying now, really crying. Alessandro. But this? Keeping my daughter from me? That's different, Sofia. That's. His voice broke. Actually broke. And Sofia realized she'd never heard Alessandro Moretti sound like this. Vulnerable. Raw. Broken. I'm coming back, he said finally. What? To your apartment. We're going to talk. Really talk. No more secrets. No more pride. No more running. Alessandro, I don't think. I've wasted 6 months, Sofia. I'm not wasting another minute. The line went dead. Sofia sat there, phone in hand, her heart racing. He knew. Alessandro knew about the baby. Their baby. And he was coming back. Outside her window, the rain continued to fall. But somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. 20 minutes. That's how long Sofia had before Alessandro arrived. She paced her small apartment, her hand instinctively resting on her belly as the baby, their daughter, kicked and rolled, sensing her mother's agitation. What do I tell him? She whispered to the empty room. How do I explain? But there was no good answer. No script for this moment. No way to justify 6 months of silence, of secrets, of letting him believe he meant nothing to her when the truth was the opposite. The truth was that she loved him so much it terrified her. Loved him so much she'd walked away rather than watch him destroy himself in his dark world. Loved him so much she'd wanted to give their daughter a chance at a normal life, away from blood and violence and the weight of the Moretti name. But standing here now, in her modest apartment with its second-hand furniture and peaceful quiet, Sophia wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Because their daughter deserved to know her father. And Alessandro, despite everything, despite his empire of shadows and his reputation of fear, Alessandro deserved to know his child. A knock at the door. Sophia's heart stopped. He was here. She walked to the door on trembling legs, her hand hovering over the handle. One breath. Two. Then she opened it. Alessandro stood in the hallway, rain still dripping from his coat. His hair was slightly disheveled, unusual for a man who was always perfectly composed. His eyes were dark, intense, burning with an emotion she couldn't quite name. They stared at each other for a long moment. "Hi," Sophia whispered finally. "Hi," Alessandro replied, his voice rough. Another silence. "Can I come in?" Sophia stepped back, opening the door wider. Alessandro entered, his presence immediately filling the small space. He'd been here before, once, months ago, when he'd hired the security company to install extra locks and a panic button she didn't know about. But this felt different. More intimate. More dangerous. Sophia closed the door, then turned to face him. Alessandro stood in the center of her living room, looking strangely out of place. This man who commanded boardrooms and controlled empires, standing in a modest apartment with mismatched furniture and baby books stacked on the coffee table. His eyes found those books. What to expect when you're expecting. Your pregnancy week by week. Italian baby names. That last one made his jaw clench. "Sit down," Sophia said softly. "Please." Alessandro moved to the couch, lowering himself slowly. His eyes never left her face. Sophia sat in the armchair across from him, creating a safe distance. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Alessandro broke the silence. "How long have you known?" His voice was controlled, but Sophia could hear the tremor beneath it. "That I was pregnant?" "About 8 months." "And when did you plan to tell me?" Sophia looked down at her hands. "I didn't." "Didn't?" "I thought it was better this way." Alessandro's hands curled into fists on his knees. "Better? Better for whom, Sophia? For you? For our daughter? For me? For all of us?" The words burst out of her, months of pent-up emotion finally breaking free. "Your world is dangerous, Alessandro. People try to kill you on a regular basis. Your enemies would have used her, used us, as leverage. Every day would have been a threat, a risk, You think I don't know that?" Alessandro's voice rose for the first time. "You think I haven't spent every day of the last 6 months knowing you were out here, unprotected, alone? Do you have any idea what that did to me? You let me go. Because you asked me to. Because you stood in our house and told me you couldn't live in my world anymore. That you couldn't watch me become more monster than man. That you deserved better." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want better, Alessandro. I wanted you. I wanted the man I married. The one who quoted poetry in Italian when he thought I was asleep. The one who saved every drawing I ever made for him. The one who held me during thunderstorms because I was afraid of lightning." Alessandro's expression cracked, pain flashing across his features. "That man. I thought you didn't want him anymore. I wanted him to want me back." Sophia stood up, her voice breaking. "But you were always so distant, so cold. You came home covered in blood and wouldn't talk about it. You pushed me away every time I tried to get close. You built walls so high I couldn't climb them anymore. Because I was trying to protect you. No. Sophia's hand slammed down on the armrest. You were trying to protect yourself. You were afraid, Alessandro. Afraid that if you let me all the way in, if you showed me the parts of yourself you thought were too dark, too damaged, too far gone, I would leave. Alessandro stood now too, facing her across the small room. So you left anyway. Because you were already gone. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. You were there, but you weren't there. And I couldn't keep breaking my heart trying to reach someone who didn't want to be reached. Tears were streaming down her face now. And then I found out I was pregnant. And I knew, that if I told you, you would do the right thing. You would take me back, protect me, provide for me. But it would be out of duty. Out of obligation. Because of the baby, not because of me. Alessandro took a step closer. You're wrong. Am I? Sophia looked up at him, her eyes red. Tell me honestly, Alessandro. If I hadn't been pregnant, would you have come back? Would you have fought for us? Alessandro opened his mouth. Then closed it. Because they both knew the answer. No. He wouldn't have. He would have let her go, convinced himself it was for the best, buried himself deeper in his empire until he couldn't feel the loss anymore. I'm sorry, he said finally, his voice breaking. Sophia, I'm so sorry. And then Alessandro Moretti, the man who never apologized, never showed weakness, never admitted fault, did something he'd never done before. He fell to his knees. Right there in her living room. Sophia gasped. Alessandro. I was a coward, he said, looking up at her with eyes full of raw emotion. You were right. I was terrified. Terrified that if you really knew me, all of me, the darkness and the violence and the things I've done, you would run. So I pushed you away first. Before you could leave me. His voice cracked. But you left anyway. And I've been dying inside every day since. Sophia's hand covered her mouth, tears falling freely now. I had men watching you, Alessandro continued. Not to control you. But because I couldn't sleep knowing you were out there without protection. I paid your medical bills. Made sure your apartment was secure. Followed you from a distance like a ghost because I couldn't stand to be close but couldn't bear to be far away. He reached up, his hand hovering near her belly but not quite touching. And when I saw you tonight, when I saw you pregnant and thought you'd moved on, that another man had given you what I couldn't, it broke something in me. Alessandro. I love you, Sophia. The words were simple. But they carried the weight of everything unsaid. I've loved you from the moment you walked into my life. And I never stopped. Not during the divorce. Not during the silence. Not ever. Sophia sank to her knees in front of him, her hands finding his face. You idiot, she whispered through her tears. You beautiful, stubborn, infuriating idiot. I know. The baby is yours. She was always yours. Only yours. Alessandro's eyes closed, and a single tear traced down his cheek. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Sophia continued. I was scared. Scared you'd feel trapped. Scared I'd lose myself trying to fit into your world again. Scared that. Alessandro kissed her. Soft at first. Then deeper. A kiss that tasted of tears and rain and 6 months of longing. When they finally pulled apart, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. I don't want you to fit into my world, Sophia. I want to build a new one. One where you're safe. Where our daughter is safe. Where I can be the man you fell in love with. But your empire is just power and money. You and our daughter? You're everything. Sophia's hands moved to her belly, and this time, Alessandro's hands joined hers. The baby kicked, strong and clear. Alessandro's eyes widened. She's really in there. Sophia laughed through her tears. Yes, you idiot. Where else would she be? Can I talk to her? Alessandro, you don't have to ask permission. But he was already leaning closer, his lips near Sophia's belly. Hi, little one, he whispered in Italian. I'm your papa. And I know I'm late to the party, but I promise both of you, I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere ever again. The baby kicked again, right where Alessandro's hand rested. He laughed, a sound of pure joy that Sophia hadn't heard in over a year. She knows my voice, he said wonderingly. Of course she does. I talk to her about you all the time. Alessandro looked up at Sophia, his eyes questioning. I told her stories, Sophia admitted. About the man who brought me flowers every Friday, even though he pretended it was just because they were on the way home. About the man who learned to cook my favorite meal and burned it 3 times before getting it right. About the man I fell in love with. Past tense? No, Sophia whispered. Present. Always present. I never stopped loving you either, Alessandro. Even when I wanted to. Even when it hurt too much to feel it. They stayed there on the floor, holding each other, hands on her belly, feeling their daughter move between them. Finally, Alessandro spoke. Marry me. Sophia pulled back. What? Marry me. Again. For real this time. Not because of the baby. Not out of obligation. But because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you. Alessandro, we're already divorced. So we'll undo it. I own half the judges in this city anyway. Despite everything, Sophia laughed. That's very romantic. I'm serious, Sophia. His hands cupped her face. I want to be your husband. Want to be there when our daughter is born. Want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Want to build a life that's worth living, not just surviving. What about your business? I'm stepping back. Marco can handle the day-to-day operations. I'll still be involved, but from a distance. No more late nights. No more blood on my shirts. No more choosing between my empire and my family. Can you really do that? For you? For her? Alessandro's voice was firm. I would burn my entire empire to the ground. Sophia studied his face, searching for doubt. She found none. Ask me again, she whispered. What? Ask me again. Properly. Alessandro understood. He stood, then helped Sophia to her feet. Then, for the second time in 10 minutes, he knelt. But this time, he pulled a small box from his pocket. Sophia's eyes widened. I've carried this every day since the divorce, Alessandro said quietly. Your wedding ring. I couldn't throw it away. Couldn't sell it. Couldn't even put it in a safe. So I kept it with me. Just in case. Just, hoping. He opened the box. The ring gleamed in the soft light, a simple band of white gold with small diamonds, elegant and timeless. Sophia, Alessandro said, his voice steady now, sure, will you marry me? Not because I'm asking out of fear or duty. But because you're the love of my life, the mother of my child, and the only person who's ever made me want to be better than I am. Sophia looked down at him, this powerful, dangerous, broken, beautiful man. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. Alessandro stood, sliding the ring back onto her finger where it belonged. Then he kissed her like it was the first time and the last time all at once. When they finally broke apart, Sophia was laughing and crying at the same time. We're really doing this? We're really doing this. You know it's not going to be easy, right? Babies are hard. Marriage is hard. Combining our two stubborn personalities is going to be worth it, Alessandro finished. Everything with you is worth it. He placed his hand on her belly again. When is she due? 6 weeks. And you're really okay? Healthy? The doctors are. Alessandro. Sophia placed her hand over his. We're fine. Both of us. Better than fine now. Alessandro pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her carefully, mindful of her belly. I've missed you, he whispered into her hair. God, Sophia, I've missed you so much. I've missed you too. They stood there, holding each other, as the rain continued to fall outside. After a while, Sophia pulled back slightly. Alessandro? Yes? You said you had people watching me. Yes. Did you really have someone following me everywhere? Alessandro had the grace to look slightly sheepish. Only 2 guys. Rotating shifts. Very discreet. Alessandro. You were pregnant and alone. What was I supposed to do? Sophia shook her head, but she was smiling. You're impossible. You love me anyway. Unfortunately, yes. Alessandro grinned, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Come on, he said, guiding her to the couch. Sit. Put your feet up. You look exhausted. I am exhausted. Your daughter has been using my bladder as a trampoline all day. My daughter has excellent taste in trampolines. Sophia laughed as Alessandro helped her get comfortable, then sat beside her, immediately pulling her feet into his lap and beginning to massage them. Oh my God, Sophia groaned. Don't stop. Ever. Never, Alessandro promised. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the rain against the windows and the soft music playing from Sophia's phone. What are we going to name her? Alessandro asked suddenly. I've been thinking about that. What about? Isabella? Alessandro's hands stilled on her feet. Isabella, he repeated softly. After my mother. I know you miss her. And I thought, maybe our daughter could carry that legacy. The good parts of it. Alessandro's eyes were suspiciously bright. Isabella Sofia Moretti, he said. It's perfect. You like it? I love it. Almost as much as I love you. Sophia smiled. Smooth talker. I learned from the best. They talked for hours after that. About the baby. About the future. About the new life they would build together. Alessandro told her about his plans to restructure his business, to create distance between the legitimate enterprises and the darker elements. To ensure that by the time Isabella was old enough to understand, the Moretti name would mean something different. Sophia told him about her pregnancy journey, the morning sickness, the weird cravings, the moment she first felt the baby kick and cried because Alessandro wasn't there to share it. I'm here now, he kept saying. I'm here now, and I'm not missing another moment. As the night grew late, Sophia started to drift off on the couch. Come on, Alessandro said gently. Let's get you to bed. Are you staying? If you'll have me. Always. Alessandro helped her to the bedroom, where she changed into comfortable clothes while he awkwardly stood in the hallway, giving her privacy. When she called him back in, he found her already under the covers, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd seen her in months. Stay, she whispered. Alessandro removed his jacket and shoes, then climbed into bed beside her. Sophia immediately curled into him, her belly pressed against his side, her head on his chest. I've dreamed about this, she admitted quietly. About what? This. You holding me. Us being together. Our daughter safe between us. Alessandro's arms tightened around her. I promise you, Sofia. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for the time I wasted. For the pain I caused. For every moment I chose wrong. You're choosing right now, Sofia murmured sleepily. That's what matters. Within minutes, exhausted from emotion and pregnancy, she was asleep. Alessandro lay awake, one hand on her belly, feeling his daughter move. His family. His purpose. His redemption. I love you, he whispered to both of them. Both of you. More than life itself. Outside, the rain finally stopped. And as Chicago slept, Alessandro Moretti, the most feared man in the city, smiled. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about power or control or empires. He was thinking about 2 a.m. feedings. And diaper changes. And teaching his daughter to be strong and kind and nothing like him. Everything like her mother. And it was the best thought he'd ever had. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the tiny, perfect sounds of a newborn baby. Alessandro sat in the chair beside Sofia's bed, his daughter, cradled carefully in his arms. Isabella Sofia Moretti. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. 20 inches long. Perfect in every way. She has your nose, Sofia said from the bed, exhausted but glowing. God help her, Alessandro murmured, unable to take his eyes off the tiny face. And your stubbornness, I'm sure. Definitely my stubbornness. Isabella's tiny hand wrapped around Alessandro's finger, gripping tight. And just like that, the most powerful man in Chicago fell completely and utterly in love. Hey, little one, he whispered. I'm your papa. And I promise you, I'm going to spend every day making sure you know you're loved. You're safe. You're the best thing I've ever done. Sofia watched them, tears streaming down her face. I wish I could take a picture of this moment. No pictures, Alessandro said automatically. Then he smiled. But you can remember it. File it away. Tell her about it when she's older. Tell her what? The day her father became the man he was always supposed to be. Sometimes, the strongest walls we build aren't around our homes or our cities, they're around our hearts. Alessandro built an empire on power, but he was powerless against his own fear of being truly known. Sofia walked away to protect herself, but in doing so, she denied both of them the chance to fight for what mattered most.